I've always been an early riser. Every morning, I find myself in our humble but cozy kitchen, whipping up breakfast while keeping an eye on my son Liam and my husband Michael. It's a doozy of a routine, but it's one I've come to cherish. Liam, my sweet boy, he's got his challenges. The doctors say he's on the autism spectrum and has epilepsy, which makes learning a bit of a struggle for him. But let me tell you, that boy has a passion for music that lights up my world. It's like a beacon of hope in our sometimes stormy life. This morning, as I was packing Liam's lunch, I heard him strumming a gentle melody on his guitar. My heart swelled with pride. Without making eye contact, Liam said with a shy smile, "Mom, I think I can play this whole song at school today." I couldn't help but move closer, placing my hand on his shoulder. "You're going to shine, my son. Your music is like a light for all of us," I told him, feeling every word deep in my soul. Saying goodbye as he headed off to music school was brief but meaningful. Liam clutched his music folder like it was his lifeline. I tried to hide the worry in my voice as I reminded him, "Be careful, and don't forget to take your medicine on time." "Don't worry, Mom. I've got it all written down in my special med notebook," Liam reassured me. He's becoming such a responsible young man. With Liam off to school, it was time for my second mission of the day, taking Michael to another medical consultation. Back in my day, I never imagined I'd be spending so much time in hospitals and doctors' offices. As we drove, Michael gazed out the window, lost in his dark thoughts. The silence in the car was as heavy as the burden we both carried. Michael's voice, weak and trembling, finally broke the silence. "Sophia, do you think Liam will be okay?" he asked, his eyes filled with anguish as he looked at me. Keeping my eyes on the road, I answered gently, "He's facing his challenges just as bravely as you are, Michael. Liam is strong, you know." After a moment of silence, Michael continued, his voice choked with emotion, "But have you ever thought that my illness might have affected Liam somehow? That he might end up like me?" His words pierced my heart like a dagger. I reached out and squeezed his hand briefly, trying to convey comfort through my touch. "Michael, Liam's condition is just by chance. Just like what happened to you. It's not your fault, and you didn't pass anything on to him. We know that. His epilepsy and his difficulties are challenges he was given to face from birth, just like we face our own." Michael let out a deep sigh, full of pain and uncertainty. "But Sophia, sometimes I think, am I a burden to you? Is all this, my illness, the consultations, the care, preventing you from living the life you should have?" I slowed the car down and looked at Michael with love and determination in my eyes. "Michael, listen to me. You are not, and never will be, a burden to me. What we have is rare and precious. The love we share, the moments we spend together, the family we've built, that's what matters. I chose to be by your side, for better or for worse. And as for Liam, he's our miracle, our little warrior. The good Lord doesn't give us battles we can't face together. We're strong, you hear me?" Michael looked at me, tears welling up in his eyes. "Sophia, I love you. I'll be eternally grateful for everything you do for us. I just wish." I placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. "Shh! You don't need to say anything more. We're in this together, always have been, always will be. Let's face whatever comes our way, side by side." In the hospital waiting room, I could feel the weight of sympathetic and curious glances from other patients. As I helped Michael walk, each step served as a reminder of the relentless progression of his illness. I felt the weight not just in my arms, but in my heart too. When Dr. Campbell called us in, his face was serious. It was like looking at a thundercloud about to burst. He started talking about Michael's condition and my heart almost stopped. "The disease was progressing fast," he said. I glanced at Michael, the look on his face, it was like he'd seen a ghost. He tried to speak, but the words just wouldn't come out. Poor thing, he was scared stiff. Dr. Campbell took a deep breath before he continued. He talked about how things had changed since Michael's first diagnosis. Back then, the symptoms were as subtle as a whisper. But now, it was like nothing he'd ever seen before. I couldn't help myself, I just had to interrupt. My voice was shaking like a leaf, but I had to ask if there was anything else we could do. Any new treatments, experimental stuff, anything at all. Dr. Campbell shook his head, and I felt my heart sink. He explained that resources were limited in our little town, and that he, as a small-town doctor, had his limits too. Then he mentioned something about bigger hospitals in the city having more advanced treatments. It was like a tiny spark of hope in a dark room. Michael, bless him, he spoke up then. His voice was weak, but his words hit me like a ton of bricks. He talked about Liam, our son, and how he'd finally settled into his new school. The autism, the epilepsy, it was all such a delicate balance. I found my voice then. I put every ounce of determination I had into it. I told Michael that we'd find a solution, that we had to consider all our options if it meant better treatment for him. Dr. Campbell, he looked at us like we were something special. He offered to help with referrals and such. It was a comfort, knowing we weren't alone in this mess. On the drive home, I was quiet. My mind was going a mile a minute, thinking about all the tough decisions ahead. I tried to sound strong when I suggested we consider the doctor's idea, but inside, I was uncertain. Michael, he was looking out the window, his eyes tired and worried. He couldn't stop thinking about Liam, about how he'd finally found a place where he fit in. I took Michael's hand then and I was fighting back tears. I told him we'd find a way, just like we always had. There was hope in my voice. After a spell of silence, Michael started talking again, his voice as heavy as lead. He was fretting about money, and let me tell you, it was a doozy of a problem. Our disability check is all we've got, he said, worry etched on his face like a map. Big city living costs an arm and a leg. I sighed, knowing he was right. But I wasn't about to throw in the towel. I told him I might be able to rustle up some part-time work, and for Liam, well, we'd find a school that'd fit him like a glove. Michael looked at me then, his eyes welling up. He started apologizing, saying he felt guilty for putting me in this situation. He was worried I'd work myself to the bone. I squeezed his hand tight, trying to comfort him. I told him there was no need for sorry. This was our cross to bear as a family, and taking care of them was what gave me strength. We'll weather this storm, I said. The good Lord will guide us. That night, we were sitting on our old sofa that's seen better days, flipping through rental ads. I found a place that looked promising, not smack dab in the city center, but close enough to the hospital to make sense. Michael nodded, but I could see the worry lines on his face. He asked about Liam's music school, and I felt my heart sink. I ran my fingers through my hair, feeling flustered. All the music schools I'd found were pricey, nothing like our community program here. Michael stared at the floor like it held all the answers. Music's Liam's whole world, he said, his voice thick with guilt. We can't take that away from him. I tried to keep my chin up, talking about scholarships and programs we might find. We've got to keep hope alive, I said, sounding braver than I felt. Your health comes first now. The next day, I steeled myself to talk to Liam about the move. I found him in his room, playing his guitar like it was an extension of his soul. I sat down next to him, feeling nervous. Liam, honey, I started, we need to have a talk about something important. Liam stopped playing and looked at me with those big curious eyes of his. It was like looking into pools of wonder. I started explaining about the move, choosing my words carefully. I told him we needed to move to a bigger city where his daddy could get better treatment, maybe even get well again. I tried to sweeten the deal, saying his daddy might be able to play with him again. Liam just sat there, quiet, trying to make sense of it all. Then he started rocking back and forth. It broke my heart to see him so upset, but I knew we had to push through. I tried to comfort him, promising we'd find a new music school. But Liam, he just kept staring off into space. When he finally spoke, his voice was shakier than a leaf in a windstorm. He was scared of being bullied again like in his old school. Oh, the pain in my chest when I heard those words. It was like someone had reached in and squeezed my heart. I put my hand on his face, trying to pour all my love into that touch. I told him how wrong and unfair those kids had been, that he should never believe such cruel words. I reminded him of his incredible talent for music, how special he was. I poured my heart out, telling him he could do anything, that nothing in this world should make him feel less. I painted a picture of his future as a great musician, captivating people with his art. But I also explained why we needed to do this, why his daddy's health was so important. I told him we'd face this together, as a family. Liam looked at me, and I could see my words sinking in, like rain into dry earth. But he was still scared, worried about being disliked or having an episode in front of everyone. I hugged him tight, rocking him, let's protect each other, and remember that you have incredible strength within you. You've already overcome so much, and this change is just one step on the journey. I kissed Liam on the forehead, just please, my love, your calm is so important in this process. Don't make it too hard on your father. I believe in you too. As we drove towards our new life, I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror at Liam. He was lost in thought and quiet. It nearly broke my heart to see him so withdrawn. I turned to Michael, worry etched on my face like a roadmap. I'm worried about Liam, I said. He's gone and retreated into his own little world again. Michael let out a sigh that seemed to come from his very soul. He knew this change was a doozy for all of us, but especially for Liam. We'd have to work harder to help him adjust. I tried to keep my chin up, hoping against hope that Liam would find his music again and open up after all this. But I was scared stiff of failing as a mother again. When we finally got to our new apartment, it was like stepping into a shoebox. Michael and I put down our suitcases and looked around, feeling like the walls were closing in on us. I plastered on a smile and said, with a little elbow grease, we might just make it homey. Michael came over, looking thoughtful as a philosopher. He told me he'd made an appointment with the neurologist for next week. It was like a tiny spark of hope in a dark room. I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. Well, is that a ray of sunshine? I said. Maybe we'll finally see some light at the end of this long, dark tunnel. Michael eased himself into a chair, sighing like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was scared. Scared of losing what little independence he had left, of becoming an even bigger burden on me. I knelt down in front of him, taking his hands in mine. Tears were rolling down my cheeks. Michael, I said, you've always been there for us. Now it's our turn to be there for you. We'll face this together, come hell or high water. The next week, as we approached the neurology clinic, I was nervous. But let me tell you, that building was something else. I never imagined I'd come to such an advanced, recognized place, I said, looking at the building with admiration. As we stepped into Dr. Morris's office, I felt like we'd walked into a freezer. The doctor gave Michael a look that could curdle milk, like she'd seen a ghost or something. It wasn't but a moment before she composed herself, but I'd caught it, and it rubbed me the wrong way. I thought to myself, well, I'll be a big city neurologist getting all flustered over a patient. The consultation started off cold. Dr. Morris asked us, dry as dust, how we'd managed to get an appointment. I told her about Dr. Campbell, who'd been our doctor back home for many years. The name seemed to ring a bell for her. She went on about how she and Dr. Campbell had worked together back in the day, how he was a good doctor but too big a fish for such a small pond. The way she talked about him staying in our town, she continued in a tone about having limited options. I felt my anger rising. This high and mighty attitude was starting to get to my nerve. But Michael tried to steer the conversation back to his condition. Dr. Morris started talking about all the fancy equipment they had, treatments you couldn't get in small towns like ours. She wanted to run Michael through more tests. I was relieved to hear about the advanced treatments, but this doctor's bedside manner left a lot to be desired. It made me miss Dr. Campbell something fierce. Sometimes, a kind word's worth more than all the high-tech gadgets in the world. As the consultation went on, Dr. Morris asked Michael about how his condition had progressed. She was flipping through her file. Michael, his voice quiet but steady as a rock, told her how the disease had been advancing fast. He said every day felt like a fight with time. As Dr. Morris started grilling Michael about our family history, I felt irritable. What did Michael's parents have to do with his condition? I couldn't help myself. I jumped in politely and asked how this family tree business was relevant to Michael's treatment. She looked at me and started explaining slowly that she was the doctor and needed to understand all aspects of Michael's condition. I reckon she thought I'd fallen off the turnip truck. Michael tried to smooth things over. He told her about his parents passing, but assured her there wasn't any family drama worth writing home about. Then she turned her attention to Liam, and I swear my heart started beating fast. When I mentioned Liam's epilepsy and autism, that woman's eyes lit up. She started muttering about genetics playing a bigger role than we thought. I tell you, Michael and I exchanged glances. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more tense, Dr. Morris dropped a bombshell about some experimental treatment. But then she had the gall to question our decision to move to the big city. I was madder than a wet hen, but I kept my cool. I explained about our apartment situation, trying not to let on how much her words had gotten under my skin. And then, if you can believe it, she washed her hands of us. Said she wouldn't be treating Michael after all, but would pass us on to someone else. Michael and I exchanged glances, feeling both relieved and frustrated at the same time. I couldn't help but think that maybe we should find a different doctor, considering Dr. Morris's cold approach. But I tried to focus on the positive side of things. At least we can get the tests started, I told myself, trying to remain hopeful. Dr. Morris mentioned that the tests could be scheduled that day at the imaging center, just 3 blocks from here. She handed me a list of tests, and as I took it, I quickly scanned through the list. It was a lot of tests, some of which I had never even heard of before. Determined to make the most of any opportunity that might improve Michael's condition, I said to myself, let's get this done today. As we left the consultation room, I noticed how affected Michael was by the meeting. He seemed drained, and I reached out to support him. Liam was still quiet, following us closely but without saying a word. After the medical consultation, I decided to take Liam to the local ice cream shop. It was a promise I had made to him. As we sat down to enjoy our treats, I tried to keep the conversation light and cheerful, hoping to ease the tension of the day. I smiled at him and said, "Look, Liam, we should enjoy these small moments of happiness." I encouraged him to relax and savor this simple joy. Michael, watching us with a loving expression, added that moments like these are precious. He said that no matter what challenges we face, there is always room for joy and laughter. We need to enjoy more moments like this, he said with a warm smile. I nodded, feeling a bit lighter at his words. You're right, Michael, I agreed. It's important to remember that, especially on tough days. Smiles and laughter give us the strength to keep going. Liam seemed to perk up a bit, starting to talk about his favorite ice cream flavors. He even compared each flavor to music, saying that every one of them felt like a different melody to him. For a moment, the challenges we were facing seemed a little further away. Michael, leaning on his cane, looked at us with gratitude in his eyes. I gently squeezed his hand and said, "We're always together, facing this side by side, one step at a time. And we'll always make time for ice cream along the way." On our way back to the car, Michael and I had a deeper conversation about the consultation. Even though the doctor is a bit unusual, I feel like we're making progress. I tried to add some hope to my voice. Having access to experimental treatment could be a big step. Maybe it's the light at the end of the tunnel. Michael gazed out the window for a moment, lost in thought, before he responded. Yeah, the tests are the first step, and maybe this new medication will make a difference. I'm willing to try anything. I placed my hand over his and reassured him, I'm with you every step of the way. Whatever decisions we make together, I'll be here to support you, so don't worry. After a moment of silence, Michael shifted the conversation. He suggested we avoid mentioning Dr. Morris when talking to Dr. Campbell about our consultation. He felt it would be best, given how kind Dr. Campbell had been to us, and we didn't want to risk upsetting him. I nodded in agreement. I said that Dr. Campbell always had the best intentions, and there was no need to burden him with our first impressions of Dr. Morris. I emphasized focusing on the positive, reminding myself that it was because of Dr. Campbell that we even had new possibilities to explore. Michael agreed, saying that what mattered most was the treatment, not the doctor's personality. He mentioned the experimental drugs and other therapies, noting that their potential benefits were what was truly important. I forced a smile, feeling a mixture of hope and anxiety welling up inside me. I said we needed to keep our hearts open and stay strong. As we approached the imaging center, I parked the car in front of the building. The street was unusually quiet at that moment, almost eerie in its stillness. I told Michael to wait, saying I would take Liam across the street first. It was quite busy, and I wanted to make sure he was safe before coming back to help Michael. I got out of the car and took Liam's hand, leading him across. Michael, looking at the empty street, seemed to decide he could cross on his own. He called out to me, saying he thought it was safe now, and slowly opened the car door. Leaning on his cane, he began to cross the street. After settling Liam on a bench across the way, I turned back to call out to Michael. That's when I saw it, a black Audi, suddenly accelerating from behind our car, heading straight toward him. My heart froze in my chest. Before I could shout a warning, the car hit Michael, sending him flying onto the pavement, where he lay still. A scream tore from my throat, filled with a pain and terror I hadn't known I could feel. I left Liam on the bench and ran into the middle of the street, collapsing beside Michael. Tears streamed down my face as I begged someone to call an ambulance, my voice breaking. I clutched Michael's hand, sobbing, calling his name over and over, hoping, praying, that he would respond. People began to gather around us, some pulling out their phones to call for help. Holding Michael close, I pleaded for his safety, my entire world narrowing down to that desperate hope. The sound of an approaching ambulance's siren cut through my shock like a lifeline. I cried out for help amid the growing crowd, my mind racing. I shouted for someone to call the police, insisting this wasn't an accident, that someone had tried to kill my husband on purpose. Panic gripped my voice as I searched the faces around me, desperately asking if anyone had seen the license plate or who was driving. I ran back to Liam, who sat on the ground, hugging his knees, his eyes wide and vacant with shock. I knelt beside him, my voice shaking as I asked if he'd seen the car or who had done this to his dad. But Liam didn't respond, his gaze empty, lost. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics rushed over to Michael, working quickly to stabilize him. I watched, feeling helpless, as they placed a neck brace on him and prepared to transport him. I sat beside Michael, tears streaming down my face, trying to explain his condition to the paramedics. He's got a progressive neurological disease, I pleaded, my voice shaking like a leaf in the wind. Please, handle him with care. My hands trembled as I gripped Michael's hand tightly, not wanting to let go. Inside the ambulance, the ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and fear. I held Michael's hand as if it were the only thing tethering me to reality, while Liam sat next to me, still in shock, staring blankly ahead. I turned to one of the paramedics, desperation clear in my voice. I believe he'll be okay, he will be, right? My words caught in my throat, choked by a mixture of hope and terror. One of the paramedics, monitoring Michael's vitals, tried to reassure me. He told me, in a calm, controlled voice, that they were doing everything they could, and that Michael was in good hands. I nodded, clutching Michael's hand even tighter, but my eyes kept drifting to his pale, still face. I couldn't stop the tears from falling as I whispered a silent prayer, my voice trembling yet filled with fierce determination. Dear God, please, in this time of despair, spare Michael's life. He is my love, my partner, the pillar of our family. Please, let him stay with us. He is the father of our son now, the anchor of our home. We need him, O Lord, more than ever. I squeezed Michael's hand, as if trying to pour all my strength into him. Lord, we each have our appointed time, but please, don't let this be his. There's so much left for us to experience together, so many plans, so many promises. Tears flowed freely down my face as my prayers grew more fervent. God, please give him the chance to keep walking by my side, to see our son grow and succeed in music. He's such a good man, always putting his family first. Please, grant him the strength to pull through this. I closed my eyes, seeking strength and faith that felt lost. Sometimes, I've doubted your plans, but I've never lost my faith. Now, I believe you'll guide us through this dark time. Wrap Michael in your love and healing, let him feel my presence and love, so it helps him come back to us. Opening my eyes, I searched Michael's face for any sign of improvement. God, I place Michael's life in your hands. I trust you to do what's best, but I pray that what's best is his recovery. I want him to return to our family. When we entered the sterile hallways, Liam and I sat together, feeling like time had stretched into eternity. My heart pounded in my chest as I leaned forward the moment a doctor approached. Sophia, your husband is in critical condition, the doctor explained, trying to balance compassion with the gravity of the situation. He has a severe leg fracture that requires immediate surgery. But, more concerning is the significant head trauma and intracranial bleeding. We're preparing to take him to the operating room now. The doctor's words hit me like a tidal wave, nearly knocking me off balance. I grabbed Liam's hand tightly, feeling a wave of nausea and despair crash over me. But he'll make it, right? I asked, my voice quivering, eyes brimming with tears, the agony of a wife fearing for her husband's life plain to see. The doctor sighed deeply, a look of sadness in his eyes. We are doing everything we can. But, to be honest, the situation is extremely serious. We will monitor and treat the intracranial bleeding, but his life is in danger. Before we take him into surgery, I can give you and your son a few moments with him. I believe it's important for you to have this time. I nodded silently, the weight of his words pressing down on me as I realized the gravity of the moment. I stood, holding Liam's hand, and followed the doctor. As we entered the ICU, I approached Michael's bed, surrounded by countless machines and tubes, my heart breaking at the sight. He was almost unrecognizable. Through my tears, I leaned in close to his ear, whispering words of love and encouragement. Michael, my dear, I said softly, my voice barely a whisper. Please, fight. Don't leave us now. Liam and I need you. You are our life, our joy. I love you so much. I will always love you. Please, don't give up, my love. The doctor watched us with sympathetic eyes for a moment before gently intervening. He told us they needed to take Michael for surgery. He said it was complicated and would take several hours. He suggested that we go home, rest, and take care of Liam, and that they would contact us as soon as there was any news. I was still clinging to Michael, nodding through my tears. We'll go, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. But please, take good care of him. He is everything to us. As we left the ICU and walked down the hallway, I noticed a stain on my clothes, a stark reminder of the day's brutality. I turned to Liam, who was quietly walking beside me, and said, let's go home, sweetheart. I need to change, and you need your medicine. But we'll come back as soon as we can. I took Liam's hand and slowly walked toward our car, which was parked near the neuro center. My mind was a tangled mess of thoughts about Michael and the uncertain future that lay ahead of us. As we approached the imaging center, my heart nearly stopped. My eyes widened in disbelief. I saw a familiar figure stepping out of a gold BMW parked in the doctor's reserved area. It was Michael. He was wearing an elegant suit and shiny shoes, showing no signs of the frailty he usually carried or the trauma he had supposedly suffered just hours before. This can't be, I whispered to myself, my voice shaking with confusion and shock. This is impossible. Am I losing my mind? Oh, dear God, have I gone mad? Liam, who had been quietly by my side, took my hand and started pointing towards Michael. I was frozen in place, unable to move, my eyes glued to the scene before me. Michael walked confidently towards the imaging center. For a few moments, I just stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My heart was racing, my mind desperately searching for a logical explanation. "This makes no sense," I murmured. "I just left him in the ICU. How can he be walking around like nothing happened? Was it not Michael in the ICU? This is completely insane." I watched as Michael disappeared into the imaging center, a sense of dread creeping over me. It was a fear of the unknown, of something beyond explanation. "I need to find out what's happening," I said, finally regaining a bit of composure. With a firm grip on Liam's hand, I resolved to either unravel this mystery or understand if I had truly lost my mind, and began walking toward the center. My heart pounded furiously, my mind spinning with confusion as I stormed into the imaging center. The pristine, serene environment of the center starkly contrasted with the storm of emotions I was experiencing. Without hesitation, I began shouting, "Michael, is that you? Michael, where are you?" My voice, filled with desperation and confusion, echoed through the space. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of madness, unable to comprehend why Michael, whom I had believed to be in critical condition at the hospital, was here and apparently healthy. A well-dressed receptionist, her face showing concern and surprise, quickly approached me. "Ma'am, please, you can't come in like this," she said, trying to restore order. "This is a restricted area for doctors and staff only." She glanced at my clothes, noticing the blood stains, and I could see the doubt in her eyes regarding my mental state. "I need to speak with the man who just came in. He was wearing a black suit and elegant shoes. Please, where is he?" I pleaded. My voice trembled, clearly urgent. Each word was imbued with a desperate need to understand what was happening. The receptionist, still skeptical about my sanity, tried to calm me down. "Please, calm down. We'll sort this out, but first, you need to compose yourself." Her tone was soft but firm. But I was far from being in a state to calm down. "I can't calm down until I speak with him. I need to confirm if it's Michael." Understanding my determination, the receptionist finally said, "The man you saw is Dr. David. He's the owner of this center and a renowned radiologist. You might have mistaken him for someone else." Hearing this, something inside me resisted acceptance. How could I have made such a mistake, or was it possible for someone to look so much like Michael, even though Michael is an only child? I was overwhelmed by a wave of frustration and helplessness. The entire situation felt like an unsolvable enigma. "I need to see Dr. David. I have to verify with my own eyes," I said. My voice carried a mixture of despair and resolve. The receptionist hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I'll see what can be done. Please wait here and try to calm down." Exhausted and in shock, I nodded and took a seat in one of the chairs in the lobby. Still in shock and confusion, I waited with Liam at the reception of the imaging center. Liam, equally bewildered, looked around, trying to make sense of the bizarre situation we were in. When Dr. David finally appeared, the resemblance between him and Michael was so striking that time seemed to stand still for a moment. The doctor, with an elegant demeanor and polite smile, approached me. "Ma'am, I was told to come and see you. You seem quite agitated. Is there anything I can assist with?" "I'm Dr. David Morris," he said in a calm, professional tone. I stared at him, struggling to find the right words. Hearing his last name, something within me stirred even more intensely. "Morris, like Dr. Patricia Morris?" I asked, my voice trembling like a whisper. David was momentarily surprised by the question. "Yes, she's my mother. But why do you ask? Are you one of her patients?" My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. I was desperate to understand what this revelation meant. Do you happen to have a twin brother?" I asked, hope and anxiety mingling in my voice. David, now clearly confused and feeling somewhat uncomfortable, responded, "No, I'm an only child. I'm sorry, but I'm a bit confused. Is there something specific you need?" Realizing there was nothing more he could do, David politely apologized. "Excuse me, but I have a meeting that requires preparation. I was supposed to be on vacation and return next week, but I came back early to handle a few things. I'd like to use this time effectively. If you need anything, the reception can assist you," he said as he began to leave. Driven by a mix of intuition and despair, I acted on impulse. I reached out and gently but firmly grabbed Dr. David's arm. "Please, wait. I have something to show you," I said, my voice filled with urgency. I opened my bag and pulled out a photo. It showed my husband, Michael, along with Liam and me. "This is my husband, Michael. This morning, we saw your mother for a consultation." At first, I couldn't understand why she reacted so strangely. But now I can imagine. She was truly shocked when Michael entered the examination room. She didn't want you to know about his presence. It makes the most sense. And, suspiciously, he was cruelly run over right here on this street today. David looked at the photo, his face a mix of astonishment and skepticism. "How does this relate to my mother?" he asked, still trying to grasp the connection I was suggesting. I asked, "Does your mother drive a black Audi with tinted windows?" David's expression turned genuinely worried. Seeing that David was starting to pay attention, I quickly pulled out my phone and began showing more pictures of Michael. "Look. See for yourself. You're unmistakably similar. The resemblance is undeniable. I'm convinced your mother is somehow involved in today's accident. It's too much of a coincidence," I insisted. My voice trembled with the intensity of my emotions. As David examined the photos on my phone, he felt the whirlpool of emotions within him. The resemblance was striking, and the strangeness of the situation could not be denied. This seems crazy, but there's something that makes sense about it. My mother was always overprotective. A few years ago, I learned that I wasn't her biological child. But she never talked about it, always avoiding the topic, he said. His voice reflected surprise and confusion. I looked at David with a firm resolve in my eyes. "We need to check where your mother is right now. If she really is involved, we must report it to the police. This was an attempted murder driven by a ridiculous motive. My husband is now on the operating table, facing the risk of death because of your mother. David, please. If you have even a hint of the nature of a twin, do the right thing." David, still in shock from the revelations and growing suspicions, slowly nodded. "I just thought of something. I'll check the security camera footage. It seems unreal, but I can't ignore that everything adds up. I'm an honest person. I can guarantee that. If my mother really did this, she must be held responsible," he said. His voice carried uncertainty and conflict. We headed together to the imaging center's monitoring room. David entered the access password and began reviewing the footage from the street-facing cameras. As we watched the video, time seemed to stretch on endlessly. We were both shocked when his mother's black car appeared on the screen, clearly involved in the accident that hit Michael. David went pale. He was stunned by the reality unfolding before him. "That's my mother's car. I can see the license plate. Oh my God, how horrible," he muttered in disbelief. David picked up his phone and called his mother. Trying to keep his voice calm, he asked, "Mom, where are you? Are you okay?" On the other end of the line, Patricia's voice was calm but felt distant. "I'm at home, David. I started feeling unwell, so I decided to come home early today." David tried to maintain his composure. "Oh, I see. Take care. We'll talk later." As I listened to the conversation, waves of anger and despair washed over me. "She's lying," I whispered to David. "We need to turn this footage over to the police immediately." Faced with the storm of emotions, David knew I was right. "I'll give this to the police," he said with a trembling voice. "My mother." He couldn't finish his sentence. The magnitude of the betrayal was choking him. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're doing the right thing," I said, offering quiet support. We called the police, and I described the accident, presenting the doctor as the primary suspect. The officers listened carefully, taking notes as David provided the camera footage. As one of the officers promised to investigate and take necessary action, I felt a whirlwind of emotions sweeping through me. It was like riding a roller coaster. I couldn't help but feel a bit of relief, knowing justice might be served for Michael. But at the same time, my heart was heavy as lead, thinking about the price my beloved might have to pay for this madness. "Nobody deserves this kind of treatment," I mumbled, more to myself than anyone else. David was staring off into space like he'd seen a ghost. I reckon he was trying to wrap his head around the fact that his mother might have done such a terrible thing. He whispered something about needing to understand why she did it. All I could do was nod and hold onto Liam's hand a little tighter. The next few months were difficult. I spent most of my time sitting by Michael's bedside, talking to him even though he was still out cold. I'd tell him about everything that had happened since that fateful day. How Patricia is now behind bars, likely to stay there a long time. My voice would crack as I told him how she confessed to stealing David as a baby and lying to their mom about one baby dying. It was like something straight out of one of those soap operas I used to watch back in the day. I'd squeeze Michael's hand, praying he could somehow hear me as I explained how Patricia tried to, well, hurt him because of her guilt and fear of David finding out the truth. I'd tell him about David, how he'd turned out to be a real good man. He'd been coming around, even bought Liam some new instruments. "You'd be proud," I'd say with a sad smile. I'd tell him about the doctors saying David might have found a treatment for his condition. Some new expensive thing, but David was willing to pay for it. "We're just waiting on you to wake up, sugar," I'd say, my eyes filling with tears. "There's hope for you, for us." I'd take a deep breath, trying to keep it together. "I miss you so much, every day, every second. Life is not the same without you. You're our rock, our joy." I'd tell him about Liam, how he's growing up so fast and turning into quite the little musician. "He's always asking about you, wondering when you'll wake up. That boy loves you to the moon and back, Michael. We both do." I was sitting there, holding Michael's hand like it was my lifeline, just mumbling on about all the little ups and downs of our days. Then, out of the blue, I felt his fingers twitch. I tell you, my heart nearly jumped clean out of my chest. His eyes started open slowly. "Michael," I whispered, hardly believing my own eyes. I pressed the nurse call button immediately. Tears were rolling down my face fast. I couldn't hold them back if I tried. When that nurse came running in, Michael took in a deep breath like he'd been underwater for days. Then he looked right at me, his eyes clearer than a summer sky. "Sugar," I said, my voice shaking, "you've come back to me. The good Lord's seen fit to bring you home." Michael tried to lift his arm to hug me. It looked like he was trying to lift a ton of bricks, but he kept at it. I leaned in close as I could, wrapped my arms around him tight. I felt a wave of love and gratitude wash over me like nothing I'd ever felt before. "I'm here, Sophia," he whispered, his voice rough as sandpaper. "I'm here." That hug we shared, it was like a silent promise of a new beginning, a fresh hope.
If this tale has touched your heart, we'd be mighty grateful if you'd give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Your support is what keeps us going, sharing these heartwarming stories almost every day. Don't you miss the next wonderful story that's about to pop up on your screen. We appreciate your support more than words can say. Until next time, take care and God bless.